there in the chat box right now. So go and follow our Instagram channel for this one. Now, speakers this week, just before I go about telling the speaker for today, who is the speakers coming to this week? So yeah, day before yesterday, we had Snezna. Today we had Yukti. She is speaking about spiritual leadership. Tomorrow we have Gina Arthiva, the conscious music coach. She's going to be having a lot of music on the show and speaking about how music is related to consciousness. And day after tomorrow, we have Carol Copeland speaking about facing change in the age of uncertainty. Now, who is the host for the day? So today's host for the day is Saloni H. Now, she is a business process operations manager at Alfute Motors. She has been hosting variety of events, informal and social events in her work life as well as outside her work life. She has hosted a couple of times our 5 a.m. club as well. And now she is coach trained by Gallup International USA, a very vibrant and a very smart lady who will conduct this show. So over to you, Saloni, to take us through the show.
Yash, thank you for the wonderful introduction. Truly flattered. Good evening, my Zoom, YouTube, and personal friends who are attending the 156th episode of eTalks. We really hope this hour exceeds your expectations and brings great value to the table. So allow me to introduce the stunning keynote speaker of this evening, Ms. Yukti Kapoor Mehandiratta. She dons multiple avatars, from being former Gladrag's Mrs. India runner-up to being awarded the National Women's Excellence Award 2018. She is also a successful entrepreneur and founder CEO of Silhouette by Yukti, simplistically known as SBY Academy, which offers leadership and etiquette coaching to help you make it big in life for whatever means big to you. Last but not the least, this gorgeous, hardcore corporate woman also has a spiritual bent and is a Reiki master. She extends her philanthropy towards education of underprivileged children through various NGOs. However, to me, one of the most fascinating facets is her advocation of this age-old but not very familiar known philosophy of spirituality combined with leadership in this crazy competitive world. So friends, without any further ado, I take great pleasure in presenting this virtual stage to Yukti Kapoor Mehandiratta. Yukti, over to you.
Thanks so much, Saloni, and thank you, Yash, for putting such a fantastic platform together. You guys are doing a great job. Consistency is the key for everyone's success, and I can clearly see how consistent you've been. And I believe that consistency is a function of the passion that drives you to do what you do. So many congratulations for 156th episode. It's an absolute honor for me to be here on board with you guys to talk a little bit about leadership in a different light through a different aspect. So, spiritual leadership is a new way of understanding leadership, but it is not a new way of leading. Spirituality is and has been the core of humanity for the longest time. But what is so different about spiritual leadership is what I want to talk about, especially in these crazy, uncertain times that we're dealing with, when we don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, when we don't know what normal is anymore, when we don't know whether the new normal I understand today will remain just as normal tomorrow or not. So, with such uncertainty, with so much unknown, how do we continue to stay afloat? How do we continue to lead ourselves before we can lead others? So that will be my focus of discussion today. And I want this to be a discussion and really want to invite you all to put up questions that you may have on spiritual leadership, which I would love to take up after a very brief introduction I want to make on this topic with you all. So before we even get into spiritual leadership, what does leadership really mean? There are many, many quotations on leadership. There are many different ways of understanding leadership. But for me, it is simply the capacity to translate a vision into reality. Now, when we have a vision, when we have that clarity, is when we have been able to evolve ourselves as leaders. Leadership is a capability that we all possess, but it is an ability that needs to be learned, sharpened, and improved upon. Leadership skill is a skill that needs to be honed through practice. Now, just give me a moment while I share the screen with you and take you through a little more depth on spiritual leadership. Saloni, please confirm to me if you can see the screen.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. So, spiritual leadership is the way to servant leadership. Again, a very popular terminology used these days, and I want to come to this terminology in a bit so that it doesn't remain just a terminology for us and we truly understand what this means. What's in it for me? Why should I bother understanding spiritual leadership? Is spiritual leadership about being religious? Is spiritual leadership about being a doormat in the name of goodness so anyone can walk over you? In this crazy world where competition is cutthroat, how practical is it for us to follow spiritual leadership? So, before we answer those questions, let us first clarify our understanding and come to the same page on what it truly means. Spiritual leadership involves intrinsically motivating and inspiring individuals through hope or faith in the vision of service to key stakeholders. So, when we were talking about leadership a while back, saying leadership is nothing but a capacity for us to translate a vision into reality, spiritual leadership is when your vision is directed towards serving people through the products or services that you offer. If you are a business owner, then the bottom line of your business is dictated by how deeply are you ingrained into the system of value. How well are you prepared to add value to your customers? And that value add could be through the product that you manufacture or the services that you provide. Now, in that value add, when you bring in the vision of service, is when you are encouraging yourself to lead with spirituality. It is also about instilling a corporate culture which is based on values of altruistic love, unselfish love, selfless love to produce highly motivated, committed, and productive workforce. Now, this might not look so easy to understand because when we talk about unselfish, selfless love, when we talk about going out of our way to help people, when we talk about bringing out the inner Buddha, there is a lot of fear that holds us back. And that fear essentially comes from this lack of trust that we have in our environment. And lack of trust comes from various places, from our experiences, from our childhood, from all that we have gone through, from whatever we understand success to be. So that's a much deeper conversation on understanding where that fear comes from. But for now, let's accept that yes, there is an element of fear when I say I want to bring in altruistic love, I want to bring in selflessness in my leadership. And I believe that when I'm able to do that and lead in that manner, I will be able to produce high level of motivation, commitment, and productivity from my teams as well. Now, how do we get there? Let's first understand why spiritual leadership a little more. Now, there is a concept called achieving the triple bottom line, which can only be achieved through spiritual leadership. And that triple bottom line is nothing but bringing in three most important aspects of business: your employees' well being, with you as an individual included, the financial performance of your business, and social responsibility that your corporate delivers. When all these three come together, they add to your bottom line, and hence it's called as a triple bottom line. So, the purpose of spiritual leadership is to tap into fundamental needs of both the leaders and the followers in the organization through spirituality to foster higher level of employee well-being, financial performance, and social responsibility. Now, you might think, is spirituality about a certain type of practice? Is spirituality about being religious? Is spirituality about believing in God? Is it about praying with your hands folded or your hands put together? Is there a certain method to spirituality? To which I want to bring in Dalai Lama, who better than Dalai Lama to throw some light on what is the difference between being religious and being spiritual, because they are quite different. So religion, he says, religion I take to be concerned with faith in the claims of one faith tradition or another, an aspect of which is the acceptance of some form of heaven or nirvana. So you can have your own understanding, your own ritual, your own practice from a religious standpoint. Connected with this are religious teachings or dogmas, ritual prayers, and so on. It could be certain set of customs or rituals that you like to follow, which imbibes and substantiates your religious belief. However, spirituality, I take to be concerned with those qualities of the human spirit, such as love and compassion, patience, tolerance, forgiveness, contentment, a sense of responsibility, a sense of harmony, which brings in happiness to both yourself and others. Spirituality is the reality of your spirit. Until such time you are connected with your own reality, it is not possible for us to translate any vision into any reality whatsoever. So, the path of spiritual leadership actually starts with you. When you connect with yourself, when you find what that spiritual practice is for you, when you understand that the moment you connect with your core is when you have truly found out and identified that leader that lies within, is when you are now ready to truly lead others. Leading others is not a function of role that you play. It is a function of goal that helps you to keep going. It is the vision of that goal that helps you to stay connected with yourself and truly lead people in an authentic manner. Once again, I want to reiterate on the difference between believing that leadership will come once you have the leadership role, or are you a leader with or without the role, is to say that leadership is a capability that we all possess, but the ability to truly lead comes when we bring in conscious learning and spiritual practice. Spirituality is like a muscle that you need to strengthen. Just as how you strengthen any physical muscle by going to the gym, by choosing a workout, and you know that you have to consistently keep doing it. It's not as if you can do this for a month and now your muscle is grown and developed enough and it stays there forever. You keep at it. You keep going on. You keep strengthening that physical muscle in your body through a physical workout. In the same way, we invite a spiritual practice that talks to our core, to our consciousness. For some, it could be meditation. For someone else, it could be just walking in the nature. For somebody else, it could be probably just sitting in silence. But there has to be a conscious practice that we need to invite into our life. And once we do that, we bring in commitment to stay with that practice. And we bring in consistency, which is the key to success. Even when it comes to spiritual leadership, the success lies in the consistency of that practice. So I invite you to find that spiritual practice for yourself. I invite you to commit to that practice first and bring in consistency of at least 21 days and then stretch it for a month and then 3 months to a year until you know that you are solely, deeply, intensely connected with your own self. And that's when you're truly ready to be a true leader. Thank you so much, Saloni. I would love to take up a few questions that you may have.
Thank you, Yukti. Thanks for that nice debrief and insightful information on something which is pretty new to most of our worlds. It sounds interesting, intriguing, and a bit difficult to put your hands around, but extremely important to understand the fundamentals of it. So thank you. While we, I guess, encourage everyone to put their questions in the chat box, because I'm sure there was a lot buzzing out there, maybe as a starting point, I'll pose what is coming to my mind, if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely, please.
Great. So we spoke you spoke at length about how we would define leadership in principle. But just to take a step back, how would you define a spiritual person? I mean, there are people today who don't even define themselves as, Hindus and Muslims and Christians. And I get profiles of people who say religion, spirituality. So how would you define a spiritual person to begin with?
So spiritual person is someone who is consistently, consciously and effortlessly working upon improving themselves. They are consciously working upon being a better person than they were yesterday. When
Right.
you are on a spiritual path, it's an inward journey. And that inward journey brings out the outward goodness, right? So it's really inside out. It's a journey that you sign up for because you choose to be a better version of who you are today. And every single day, Saloni, whether we consciously do much about it or not, we are all evolving as humans. Right?
Right.
Evolution is not a one-day process. It doesn't just happen once in a millennium, right? It happens every single day. But the difference is when you are consciously evolving, the speed and pace at which you evolve is much faster because you're clear about the goal, you're clear about your motivation, and that motivation for a spiritual person is to be 1% better than what you were yesterday. And that just one tiny step forward brings you to a much higher level of evolution than what others around you would gain when they're not working on it consciously enough. And the beauty of it is that even though you might think that the motivation to be on this journey is to do well professionally, the benefits of this will show in every aspect of your life. It'll show in every single relationship that you have. It will be with your spouse, with your children, with your parents, with people you don't like, with people you've not been able to stand all this while, with people you've not been able to forgive, all the physical ailments that you've been able to kind of bring into your own body because of certain strong emotions that you're holding. And when you get into the spiritual journey, you realize that all this ailment that I'm suffering with is nothing but energy blocks that I have created unknowingly. But there is a way, a conscious way for me to unlock these energy blocks. If there is a way for me to truly unleash my potential, it's one of those most exploited statements we hear about a lot of online courses, or even otherwise, that here is something that's going to help you unleash your potential. But for me, I think that unleashing is only in your hand. When you are ready to let yourself go through certain uncomfortable areas of your life because you want to clean the entire room, and not just that chair you sit on, and not just that part of the table that you're going to use, but you have the courage to pick a duster and clean every single corner of this room. You have the courage to clear the cobweb. You have the courage to throw those empty boxes of anger which are not serving you anymore. And that requires courage. That requires you signing up for being committed to this path, because it's not easy. It's really easy for us to tell people what to do. It's really difficult for us to do it on our own. And that's the only way we will be able to bring in authenticity in our leadership, by the way. Otherwise, it's just about reading 5 books and then creating, a remix of it, right? And then just delivering it as just a set of words, which don't mean much to you because you haven't walked the talk yourself.
Right. So it kind of pretty much, because you're evolving every day, you're pretty much automatically and naturally a cut above the others in this crazy cutthroat competitive world, because you will have that edge. Your physiology changes with this whole concept, right?
Absolutely does.
Right. The other thought that comes to my mind as I listen to it is, as an orator and as all that you are, it is relatively easy for you to articulate this so beautifully to all of us. But if we have to carry this forward, what would be the easiest way to explain this concept to each other? Like if I have to explain spiritual leadership, this combination, in a sentence, how would I be able to translate this message to the rest?
Well, I think for me, spiritual leadership is about uh, knowing who you really are, connecting with your soul,
Right.
and connecting with a leader within to be able to lead people outside of you. Right? So until you connect with that leader, and by the way, once you do, that leader needs to go through a learning curve, right?
Right.
It's not like the leader is sitting with some magic wand and suddenly that leader wakes up and conquers the world. No, that doesn't happen. But you've been able to at least identify the leader and know where the leader stands, and only then can you create a conscious learning path for this leader. So the leader within Saloni is at a certain level, the leader within Yukti is at another level for her own self and her own journey. And from that point on, which is our point zero, our scale of growth begins. Right? That's when we start moving from a 0 to a 1, and 1 to a 4, and 4 to an 8. And the moment you touch a 9, the scale goes further ahead, because it's only
Absolutely.
a wise person who realizes how little they know. People who believe that they know a lot are far from being wise. Because once you gain that level of wisdom, you realize that whatever you know, and how much ever it might be, with all the certificates and the glory
Yeah.
behind you, is
Yeah.
so little compared to all that you need to know. And forget about the knowledge that we can seek from the world outside. How much do you really know your own self? How comfortable are you to answer a simple question like, who am I? How well can you detach that with what you do and what you know? Right? It might sound esoteric, it might sound like a question which doesn't have practical meaning, but believe you me, if you don't have an answer to this question, then everything else is so outside of you that there is no authenticity you can bring into it at all. You're probably a carrier. You're just moving some information from point A to point B. You're not
So you
bringing yourself into it.
So you basically say you connect from within and then you spread it outside and it just grows over a period of time. As you connect to it, it gets stronger and stronger and better. And it has a rippling effect on the people who are a part of your world in this whole journey, right? In
Absolutely.
some ways. I just saw, I was a bit distracted by this very simple comment put by Geet. She's saying, practice before you preach. So practice what you preach has changed to practice before you preach, which is also pretty much true in this particular theme. But just as we go along this path, there is this little light bulb moment or this moment of truth where we kind of switch this on within ourselves, where this realization comes within ourselves, like you just mentioned, where you want to do it, where you feel like you want to do something about it, and you start from within and then it spreads outside, and it's more of an inward to outward journey. So just what do you feel was that moment of truth or that experience or that realization that, what, you really want to propagate this prophecy of spiritual leadership?
So thank you for that question, Saloni. I think in my own life, in my experience as a banker, I've been with the City and Barclays before I plunged into entrepreneurship, and spent about over a decade there at a fairly senior leadership position. And I felt that we were all just running a race blindly, and that's not restricted to banking as a sector, but just at large in the entire corporate space, or even the business space. Now, being an entrepreneur is not much different, because there is this race which is not
The
defined by
rat
any
race.
no clear tracks, but we're all kind of running against each other. And then I stumbled over a spiritual program which was led by a Reiki grandmaster, and that's when I started learning Reiki. And he also introduced a leadership program to us, which was more on spirituality. And I felt that even in that environment, after having practiced and going through that course for over 7 years, all that we were bringing in, the changes and the spirituality was somehow somewhere restricted to just a personal space. So I felt that there is this you who gets ready in the morning, okay, to go and do this work that you've chosen to do, or you have to do, whatever the case may be in your life.
True.
And then there is this you who you're trying to be. Are you with me? That I need
Yes,
to be a better
absolutely.
version of me
You have
because
this conundrum.
not going well.
Yes,
I need to
yes.
be a better version of me because I'm not such a great parent. I am not such a great daughter, right? I'm not such a great friend. And those are personal guilts which kind of, give us sleepless nights sometimes. They're far more disturbing than professional success sometimes. So I
Correct.
felt as if in that spiritual journey also, people were pretty much picking up a few pieces of spirituality and choosing to apply it at one place and not at the other. And I felt that what's missing really in this whole equation is to be able to blend these two concepts together, because
Mm.
they are part of each other. Spirituality and leadership cannot be looked at standalone. Like, you can't be a leader from 9 to 5 and then be a spiritual person from 5 to 9.
Yeah, it's a way of living. It becomes a way of living. So you got to amalgamate it with probably every walk of life, including corporate world and leadership, right?
Absolutely. And I think that was the motivation to create a course. So at SBY, we have a course called Upskilling Leadership Mastery, where we've blended the two and created a 1 year program for people to
Okay.
go through all that spirituality truly means, which is, bringing in a deeper sense of responsibility, learning how to forgive people, handling emotions like guilt, anger, love, understanding your own limiting beliefs about money, about your own effectiveness, about self-worthiness, dropping ego. So every month there is a new topic that we dive into, from stress management to handling emotions to bringing in responsibility and whatsoever. And all of that then comes together in the last month when we finally conclude this program with servant leadership. Servant leadership for me is the vision to serve people. And when we are serving people, in a lot of cultures, it is looked upon as a low profile job, right? When somebody is serving you, not, it doesn't happen as often, and we don't see too many people around genuinely thanking people who serve us. We pretty much take it as their job if you're paying for it, or we take it as a responsibility if they're our loved ones, right? You are my wife, you're supposed to serve me. You're my child, you're supposed to serve me. So there is that for granted element in service. But when you bring in the element of gratitude, is when you realize that it takes a lot for one to serve the other with all their heart, right? Bringing in that altruistic love, bringing in that element of selflessness in service is the only way to serve. And you can bring that element in your leadership as well, which does not mean that you're taken for granted. It does not mean that people will not take you seriously or you can't be assertive anymore. Being a servant leader is not about sitting with your hands folded and hoping that people do what they're supposed to do. A servant leader is very well equipped to delegate, very well equipped to get work done, but they bring in the element of humanity in the way they lead.
In fact, you touched on a very interesting point. You have been speaking about servant leadership, and I'm a certified agile project management lead myself. And ironically, one of the first things they teach us in agile project management, which is such a unconventional new form of managing the most complex business projects, the first thing they teach us in that also is servant leadership.
Wonderful.
And the immediate reaction, especially in our Asian markets, I belong to Dubai, but a lot of our audiences are Asians. And in our world, when we heard this terminology for the first time, we were like, really? Are we servants to each other? So we were kind of a bit thrown off initially, because it's a very new way of looking at the way we approach things. But then it was really embedded in our entire certification course. And it alluded to how humility is the starting point of leadership. It is you before me, like I think some of the Ankit has mentioned, you versus you. There is also you before me in that sense. A leader follows from the back. And probably that humility comes when you combine it with leadership. There is Ankit also, who's very interested in knowing that what is your take on karma in all of this?
So, the understanding of karma can be influenced by a lot of our cultural upbringing and our own experiences, the mythology and the philosophy of your religion, if you follow one. But for me, and this is a personal take that I have on karma, and I'm a strong believer of karma because I believe that everything is a function of our deeds, and it doesn't have to show immediately, but it will eventually, and it has to. So whatever you are sowing, so shall you reap, and you will see it in this lifetime. Now, what I probably beg to differ with is that whatever you do in this lifetime, you will see the effects or repercussion or consequences in the next one. I'm not waiting for the next one to happen because I don't know if it will, with whatever limited understanding I have of it. But I do know that the quality of my life is a function of every decision and action that I've taken yesterday. And all the actions and decisions I'm going to take today will define my quality of life for tomorrow. And that's the karmic cycle.
True. So I hope, Ankit, that kind of answers your question and curiosity on this portion. The other thing, I know you touched on this entire bit earlier on, but just to get it a little more specifically, because again, in this part of the world, there is a lot which by default comes with the position people handle. People mostly have difficulty in differentiating power over influence. Some people are not in high positions, but they are very influential by virtue of their personalities and probably the kind of stuff they do. But most of the people, in majority, the conventional people, when they have a person in a senior leadership position, if it is a managing director, it's a general manager, they just follow the leader. They are horse with blinkers and they just follow that. So if I am a spiritual leader, but I don't have the luxury of having that fancy title attached to me in the corporate world. How do you think I could advocate on it? You did touch on it, but if you could elaborate a little, assuming that I'm a very, very new, I'm a trainee, I'm a relatively junior, fresh associate in my business, in my company, and I want to advocate this prophecy. How do you suggest I go about it?
So let's face the reality. You do need an element of power and influence in an organization to affect the culture of the organization. So
Oh,
spiritual leadership has
yeah.
to be driven as a culture, right? Which means it should be and it will be more often than not led from top down. So it is the senior most management level. That is the team, the core team, which needs to wake up to this reality, which needs to catch up with where we are all headed, and we are all headed there. In fact, for me, Saloni, this pandemic was a wake up call in so many ways for so many
Okay.
people. When you realize that it's not about competition, because you know what, if the business has ceased for you, so it has for the competition. But what is the competition doing? What is their level of preparation, their readiness, their flexibility to now bring in the value that people are seeking? How can I add value in the current times with what I know? That
Right.
requires readiness, and it requires strength. And the strength comes when you're connected with yourself. Strength in an organization comes when people are connected with each other. And the way people connect with each other in an organization is through culture. So you can't bring a culture in place today because you realize that we are falling apart. This is what you should have done yesterday and day before and a year back and 5 years back, and at the time of your inception, from there until every day, to bring about this unanimous strength, right, which keeps you together even when your business is not making any sense. What still makes sense is that you're holding hands and you can create something new depending upon what the environment and your stakeholders require today. Right? So spiritual leadership is something that needs to be brought into an organization at a cultural level. So in my view, it will see the light of the day when it is led by the top management.
So it
As
is
much
more top down.
Yes, yes. As
It
much
is
as I
more
would
top down, right?
love
Yeah.
one awakened soul to awaken the environment, let's face it, it's going to be a very, very tough ride. It will require
Exactly.
an element of influence that you need to have in that organization.
Exactly that. And to be honest, if it is top down, the resistance to change will be relatively lesser. I wouldn't say easy because change management is a big task in everybody's hand, top down, bottom up, all the way. There is a lot of, there's a lot of cultural influence. There are a lot of other influencing factors for any kind of change management. But hopefully, if it is top down, the acceptance and the resistance will be relatively less, and we'll be able to combat that better. Having said that, I've also seen, like, I work very closely and I report actually to the senior members of the company I work for, fortunately. And I have seen that even at that level, this is a new theme, but even for regular stuff, regular change management requirements, we face a lot of resistance. And we have to use all the different techniques to get the buy-in of the actual people who need to go and implement something and spread the word. How would you recommend we people, even managers, directors, deal with the resistance they get to change if they speak about this, if they say, in the name of Lord or for the sake of doing the right thing in the community and all of that. There are many over there who just who are very, very short-sighted and want to look just to the end of the day. So how do you even recommend the directors of the company to kind of face this kind of resistance to change?
So there are many ways in which we need to look at this resistance and understand the origin of it, because it could differ in different corporate environments. But there are two things which we cannot deny and escape from at all. And that for me is inclusiveness and transparency, Saloni. When you talk about resistance to change, these are the two words that come to my mind immediately, right? So inclusiveness is when you're able to get people involved in the decision making and
Yeah.
not go and announce the new way of being. that, okay, here we are, we're going to do this differently, so get on with it. Because the moment you do that, you're not allowing people to feel any level of ownership in what you're asking them to do now.
True.
And ownership is
True.
the key. It's the key, right? We need to sign up for it, for me to bring my 100% to it. How do I sign
Absolutely.
up? You need to be asked, what is your view? And my view might not be put to consideration, by the way. And I might
Rhetorical
not.
questions sometimes, right?
Yeah. But you know what's fascinating, and there is a lot of study done on this as well, to prove that as humans, we feel the need to be heard more than the need to arrive at any consensus. So
Mm.
if you and I, agree to disagree on something, for as
Mm.
long as you've heard me, I'm okay to go ahead with your decision or your opinion or your suggestion. But if I don't feel heard, then you're only using your power or position to force me to do what I want to do, for which I'm definitely not bringing in my 100%. Right?
Even if it is a rhetorical question, it's strategic to place it there and hear what others have to say. And maybe some very valuable nuggets come out of it, actually.
I love the word you use there. Strategic is the word, right? So this is a strategy. It's a leadership strategy. You might not take in every suggestion, but allow people to be heard.
Right.
Include so that you're able to drive that change. That's the first thing to do. And the second thing to do is to bring in transparency. Be transparent about the mess you're in. Be transparent about knowing little about your next step. And
Yeah.
that's all right. As a leader, you don't need to know, and you might not always know the next 10 steps forward. You might
Right.
know probably the next step forward. And you have the courage to find the rest of the 9 steps you need to take, right? But when you
True.
bring in transparency, which allows people to see that even you are vulnerable just as how they are, is when you have an edge to edge connect, right? Human to human connect. So
In
that
fact,
is,
sorry, yeah.
I'm saying that is what really helps people to go ahead with you instead of going against you, because it's not about, my favorite cuisine that I'm forcing you to eat. It's about the direction I'm choosing for all of us. And as a leader, I'm not going to benefit from it alone. So if we do this right, then everyone has something in it, right, to take away. But how do I ensure that they come along with me and they
And
don't feel
I think the
like,
beauty is you used a very interesting word. You said expose your vulnerability. I think even if we start with our own story, like you gave your story as to how you felt when you were in the bank at a senior position, it's a rat race, and you wanted to take a step back and look at it more intrinsically and then approach your work career. So if we start as leaders, as our with our story, and what was that moment of truth which made us feel that there is a necessity for this switch to turn on, especially in these sensitive times, it will go a longer way than just, you know what, this is what I approach with and let's go with it. So it is a top-down approach, but with a lot of humility, vulnerability, probably some real-time stories of our own lives to get people to connect to this concept, right?
yes.
Great. Love your answers. I will now ask you another vulnerable question on that, in the spirit of vulnerability. You are a mother to wonderful twins, right?
Yes.
So how would you, I'm not sure how old your babies are, but if you could share that with us and tell us, how would you look at imbibing that in your children at their tender age, which is an impressionable age, because they are the future generation and they need all this even when they are schooling, not just when, you know, they are in the corporate world. So as a mother, how would you recommend we imbibe this in our kids?
So, thank you for bringing that up. It's the most beautiful part of my life. I'm blessed with twins who are 9 years old by God's grace now, a boy and a girl. And Aryan and Aisha are my best friends. I've found friends in them, and literally, so I'm sure every parent wants to believe they have friends in their children. But why I call this as a friendship is because it's a two-way communication that we've established ever since they got around articulating their thoughts and expressing their feelings. And I think that in itself brings in an element of spirituality when you are okay to be corrected by your children. And very often, Sunny, I'm reminded of my own beliefs when my actions contradict those beliefs, right? When I kind
Right.
of believe in something, but sometimes my action is contrary to it. And then here, these are my, soulmates
Flesh and
around me.
blood.
And I go back to what I believe in, and they remind me in their own very innocent ways that, Mama, don't you say you should not use negative words. Or if I land up saying something negative, they just say, Mama, cancel, cancel, cancel. Because that's what I do to them when they say something negative. I say, cancel, cancel, cancel. This won't happen. Only good will happen to us. And when they catch me say something contrary to what I believe in, they just come and say, Mama, don't you say this? And then, why are you doing that? And I think that's a beautiful space to be in with your children, when you can allow that. And when you don't let go of that innocence and that check you need to have on yourself, in the name of obedience, in the name of respect, that I need only to be talking and you have to be listening, right? That's the role we play. That's bygone, and that has never served anyone, by the way. So the more we bring in that openness in the house, the better it is. Even if it's about any spiritual practice, for me, Saloni, like for me, I meditate. Of course, I'm a Reiki master, so I practice Reiki every day. But with whatever little understanding my 9-year-olds have, when they have a cramp in their stomach, they just bring their hands to that chakra, sort of like knowing what they're doing because it was seen me do that. And they have started believing that it works. So they're not
So,
initiated into Reiki, right? You got to be initiated into that practice. But they've
right.
just seen that this belief works. And for them, that's complete knowledge, right?
So the trick is role modeling.
Yes, role modeling and
Probably.
allowing two-way communication,
Yeah.
allowing the space to be questioned as well, right? And to have the comfort to apologize when you're off track, because you will be. I mean, we're all humans, and more often than not, adults are more off track than children, honestly.
Children, they're fairly simpler human beings. Thank you so much, Yukti. I thoroughly enjoyed, you answered all my questions very convincingly. Last but not the least, from my side to you as a question, and then we'll see if the audience have something to ask. How do you have anything to tell us about this platform? What do you have to say? What is your experience? How do you think about coming back over here? Just want to hear a few words from you on it.
I think it's an amazing platform. And honestly, I've seen people do something once a fortnight, once a month. And that looks like, a way to kind of gather eyeballs and then leverage upon it later. But I have felt passion from your entire team in this brief conversation we've had. In fact, I've already reached out to your team for 5 a.m. club as well. And I want to run a guided meditation there. We have a guided meditation course as well. It'll be an
Yes.
honor for me to contribute in that way, or in any other manner, even sitting back and learning from the experts that you attract on this platform. I think it's a great contribution from your end towards humanity and helping people deal with the madness that we're all right in the middle of. And instead of just putting on a constellation, you have a plan behind it. So many congratulations for putting this up together.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your input, questions, and all of those things that you've told us. I'm not sure if there's something we have in the audience which is there to answer. Some of them are quite fascinated by the twins. They love your answer.